Charles Davis here on the Rich Eisen Show. Going to get ready for the Combine next week on the NFL Network. The on-field drills begin on Friday with the running backs and wide receivers. And before I get to the inevitable Kyler Murray question, I do want to ask you this. Do you think, because certainly when we see the defenders get out there over the weekend, it looks like it's possible, unless somebody trades up into the first 5 picks to try and maybe beat the Giants to Dwayne Haskins, that it's possible we get 5 defenders to start the NFL draft, right? At the top of the draft in Nashville?
It's very possible. Yeah, very possible. I mean, we're just so loaded that way. And I think that's why, as you said, we get to the inevitable Kyler Murray, discussion. Kyler Murray announcing he was all in for football. Okay, look, there's an appetite for the draft no matter what. We know that, a huge one. But let's just be frank about the whole thing. Did the sizzle not jump up when Kyler Murray said he was all in going for football?
Oh, sure.
It did in a big way. Because it's always about quarterbacks. And last year we didn't even have to manufacture it. They were all sitting there, and that's all we talked about up until draft time. And then those guys all played as rookies to a certain extent and with varying degrees of success, but enough to know that every single one of them figures big going forward for their ball clubs. So in a lot of ways, everything was kind of a hit last year. We'll see going forward and how it turns out. But this year, Rich, you remember us leaving last year? What the first thing said as we were leaving, kind of like, wow, that was a hell of a deal. But next year, quarterbacks, not so great.
Right.
And look at where we are already. Murray jumping in gave it a ton of sizzle, but already we're saying, could we potentially get 4 in the first round? And we weren't saying that when we left the draft last year. Everybody talked about what a disaster it was going to be. Quarterbacks always drive it.
No, I know, and I do know last year there was even a conversation that last year's draft class of quarterbacks wasn't all that, but the fact that everyone was so quarterback needy that we would see a ton taken in the first round, and we did see 5, and sure enough, we saw all 5 get the start, with the exception of Lamar Jackson. All of those kids got the start in the first half of their team's regular season. And the thing I think about Murray, and we'll talk about this obviously during our Combine coverage as well, that is truly fascinating, is that his size, his height, is now and that's going to be a very much sought out measurement next week in Indianapolis when it is officially announced, that his height and his style of play, that it is the fascination much in part because if he is in fact a first-round selection, which I think he's going to be, but a top half of the first-round draft selection, then we are now seeing the transformation of the NFL's offensive schemes from pocket passer to the college game. I think everyone's looking at this as the canary in the coal mine. Has it been completely taken over by what we've seen at the college game, Charles?
What it's been, Rich, is it's allowed people to make decisions like, I can take Kyler Murray at the top half of the draft and not lose my job automatically if he's not a superstar. And what I mean by that is the guys before him have paved the way now. Remember, you and I growing up, Fran Tarkenton was an outlier, wasn't he?
Yep.
He was an absolute outlier, okay? We weren't old enough for Eddie LeBaron, who was the ultimate outlier, but Fran Tarkenton was the outlier. And his scrambling was supposed to be the worst thing a quarterback could do. Back then, the old expression was, quarterbacks should never leave the pocket except for sheer fright. Well, he's helped change the game that way, obviously. But since that time now, and I'm just ticking off a few of them, Breeze, Wilson, Mayfield. They have now made it okay that you don't have to have every so-called measurement going. And if I take that guy, I'm taking him because of certain reasons, certain attributes he has, and I'm not as worried about what he doesn't have, and I should be okay as a general manager.
But that's still on one hand, though, Charles. You know what I mean? That's still
a problem. Oh, I know, Rich, but I'm just saying those guys have made it okay. Because remember, even Mayfield last year, you remember there was discussion. Is he big enough? Is he tall enough? Is he this? Is he that?
Right.
And for him to go at 1 was a little bit of a surprise to everyone. Everybody thought he would go later than that. And he went and blew the doors off of it. Some people thought he was the rookie of the year. So they have made it okay to do it. But if you look at Murray and watch the tape, and people will see it more and more, you will see pocket throws. Now, I don't see as many as I saw Wilson coming out of the Wisconsin system. But there's still pocket throws, And remember, he didn't go from 6'5" to shrink to 5'9". He's always been the little guy. So he knows how to maneuver, he knows how to adjust, and he gets fewer balls batted down than one would think. The other part of it, though, is here's where he's different from Lamar Jackson, because there will be a comparison, and you know it's coming. Lamar Jackson lived off of called quarterback run game. Kyler Murray doesn't live off of that. He does quarterback runs, but a lot of them are scrambles. Lamar Jackson lived off a quarterback run game, and he did with Baltimore last year as well. So it's a different type of a player coming out.
Do you think that's the comparison? Not Russell Wilson, not Baker Mayfield, just with the obvious? You don't think that's going to be the comparison?
Mayfield will be the obvious because of the system, and it makes sense. Russell Wilson because of height, but Murray didn't play like Wilson in terms of how Wilson played at Wisconsin. If you go back and take the Wisconsin tape, Wisconsin tape's a lot more pro-style, out of the pocket, doing those things. Murray doesn't do that in Lincoln Riley's system. I'm just saying the Lamar Jackson one will come up because the speed of Murray is phenomenal. And that's where Lamar Jackson was that way. But remember, two different systems in terms of how they did things. At Louisville, a ton of quarterback run game called, and Baltimore did the same last year. Richie had 26 carries in one game last year. 26. What quarterback have we ever known to have 26 carries in a game? Because there weren't 26 scrambles ever.
Julian
Edelman. So we had a lot of quarterback run game.
Julian Edelman.
Edelman out of Kent State, but at Kent State. But that's what I'm talking about. I mean, the other guys would have been Thomas Lott and J.C. Watts and Turner Gill.
Right, sure.
So it's a whole different comparison that way. But I do think a lot of people will say, okay, let's look at Lamar Jackson, look at him, because of how they throw, the ability to move around and run. But Murray's is much more of a scramble thing. I'm not saying he didn't have called quarterback runs, but I think Louisville's game plan, and Bobby Petrino had to do that with him. You had to call those quarterback runs in order to move the ball better.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.